disrupted.
America that I fought.
Weird thing to happen. Hello, one and all. Welcome to this edition of Kitz Corner. It's been a fantastic day so far. It's summertime, folks, and much like any person in the summer, maybe you're thinking of traveling. Maybe you're thinking of taking the family out somewhere to enjoy nature, enjoy the wonderful weather. But here in Canada, the true patriot love, we're still dealing with this thing called the carbon tax. And it has not only affected the cost of living for food, housing, eating, everything between, but now they're affecting your summer travel plans. And so much so that MPs are now telling Canadians that you're going to have to sacrifice any time with your family in summer road trips because it will affect the future. And it just stirs this whole controversy on what the carbon tax actually is invoking. Because whether or not climate change, whether you agree with it or not, regardless, taxing Canadians to fundamentally change the weather is not a solution. It is not any feasible measure to combat a climate crisis. Taxing Canadians upwards of the most ridiculous expense is not going to permanently affect anything. So, take this for example. This is a tweet by John Barlow, who's an MP of the Foothills, I do believe, somewhere in northern Alberta. And he stated this: in the middle of a cost of living crisis, the Liberal NDP coalition hiked the carbon tax by 23%. That's true. 23%. Families can barely afford the basic necessities, much less a summer vacation. When will Trudeau axe the tax on gas this summer so Canadians can afford a summer road trip? And here's what he said in the House of Commons during question period on this.
After 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the homelessness or the hunger. The Carbon Tax Coalition increased the carbon tax 23%, driving grocery prices up $700 per family, and a quarter of Canadians are relying on food banks. They can't afford the basic necessities, let alone a summer vacation. Conservatives have a common sense plan to eliminate all federal gas taxes until Labor Day. This will save Alberta families $955. Will the Prime Minister follow our common sense plan, eliminate the federal gas tax, so families can afford a summer holiday?
The honourable member.
The only thing that's stumbling on me is why Labor Day? Why is it only a limited offer? Like, it sounds like a department store sale. Like, oh, it's tax-free till Labor Day. Again, the whole notion of this carbon tax is kind of ridiculous. And there's more to the story that I want to show you, so stick around. But the fact that they're like, oh, well, we're going to at least attempt to give Canadians a summer road trip, time with their family, until about Labor Day. Why? Why exactly is there a cutoff point to this? Why are we not actually fundamentally having a debate on why this tax is reasonable? Like, what is it actually doing for people? What is it exactly doing for the planet? What is it solving in combating climate change? There's no real fundamental answer to this. They're just trying to mess it around all different ways. But here's the Liberal NDP coalition response to this.
Minister for Families.
Mr. Speaker, I find this question very disingenuous. We will take no lessons from the Conservatives when it comes to food bank usage, when they refuse and they vote against providing food to hungry kids at school.
The honourable member from Foothills.
You notice how that never got an applause? We will take no lessons from them because they refuse to give hungry kids at school food. Well, then what's your solution? What's your alternative? You never provided anything. You never even provided an answer to his original question. You just jumped right to the next thing. We're not going to take lessons from you because some other thing that you did. What? Yeah, this is the most theatrical performance about the carbon tax that's affecting many Canadian families and Canadians across this nation. The fact that it's at 23%, and let's put it on record that when France had their gas tax at 2%, they put a 2% gas tax on French citizens, they completely revolted against their government. They completely burnt down the cities. That was the start of the Yellow Vest movement. They did that in France. When there was a tax on tea, drinking tea, coming from British empires to the United States, that's when they revolted against the British and started a country. That was at literally 2%. Here we are at 23%. And we're just like we're still up in the air about this. Even though it's detrimentally screwing over many families across this nation. We know that's a downward spiral this tax is enduring. And like I said, there's no fundamental debate on whether it's good or not, what's actually funding. It's just, you gotta be for it, or you're going to be against it. And there's no substantive answer to this.
Out of touch is a Liberal NDP government that listens to bankers and bondholders that benefit from liberal inflation. I'm listening to my constituents like Lisa, who showed me her carbon tax rebate. It was $15. What a joke. It's not a joke for Foothills families who pay $3,000 a year in carbon taxes, have nothing left for food or homes, let alone a summer vacation. The Parliamentary Budget Officer is clear. Canadians pay more in the carbon tax than they get back in a rebate. Will the Prime Minister axe all federal gas tax this summer so Lisa could take her family for a summer road trip?
And here's an example of this that's really, really affecting how things are going in this country. Primarily in agriculture, which is one of our big fundamental resources here in Canada, especially in the prairies. The carbon tax is disproportionately affecting farmers and those living in rural Ontario, says Nader. The government of Canada introduced a price on carbon pollution across Canada in 2019 as a way to combat climate change. But farmers across Perth County say this tax is not only hurting their pocketbooks, but is also forcing prices on food, goods to rise in an already trying time. And the funny thing about this is the tax that's supposed to stop polluters, which was the whole intention of this. Oh, we're trying to tax the polluters so they stop polluting, or it's incentivized to reduce their pollution rates. Notice who they are taxing compared to who they're not taxing. And look at the statistics on the biggest polluters out there, because the biggest polluters, believe it or not, is the government itself. The biggest polluters that are causing the most CO2 and other chemical damage to the environment is the government. It's the government and the military. Those are the two biggest primal sources of pollution that are going on. Then comes 100 other corporations. And then very, very, very down at the bottom, it's farmers. It's residents. It's people that are driving the cars. But yet, because they're so down low on the pollution scale, we have to fess up our bucks to pay this carbon scam to reduce pollution caused by the top 1%. And because of all this, because of this scam, it affects the farming industry, it affects your food, it affects travel, it affects transportation, it affects every single aspect involved that's getting funneled down by this carbon scam. And like I said, this is not retaliation against the climate crisis or whether you believe environment or not. This is about the tax itself being used as a front by lying to people, saying that it's going to help the planet, how it's going to help the environment and the climate crisis by scamming people into fessing up more tax dollars for this. And here is how I know it's kind of a bit of a scam, because this got introduced. This is starting to go viral. This guy by the name of Vesper Digital says the truth, courtesy of Chrystia Freeland, admitting fossil fuels are abundant and the real reason the Liberal Party is pushing the climate change agenda. Western Canada stand up, hint, it's not about excess carbon. So this is an interview in 2014, before the Liberal Party, before Justin Trudeau even got elected. This is what she said about taxing people to solve the climate crisis. Listen to this.
We're actually at sort of a pivot point where fossil fuels are coming back, huge natural gas discoveries in the United States. We're seeing now oil sands, we're seeing the Brazilian discoveries, and we're seeing it reflected in the price. I was at the end of last week at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Shell representatives were there in force. And the big preoccupation there was not, are we running out of fossil fuels? The Russians are worried that there's too goddamn much of it on the market right now, and the prices are too low, and they were bitching about the excellence of the U.S. companies that are finding a lot of it. Gas.
Did you hear that? They're not angry at the fact that there's limited resources. They're angry at the fact that there's too much of a market. And there's too much of a market, that means prices are going to be low. And since they can't have a conglomeracy take over that industry, and they're going to allow other discoveries to be formed and other places to be mined and exported and start producing their own energy, big conglomeracies like Shell and BP that want to dictate over the market are worried. They're worried. She just said the Russians are worried because if other countries are finding energy sources, oh my God, that means how am I going to export that to other nations? How can I be the dominant superpower of exporting energy if other countries are also finding energy sources? So that is one of the reasons they're introducing this and telling you that we only had limited resources because the market, the supply is big, but the owners of it is very small. And because there's only a handful of corporations that are in control of this, they want to keep it limited. They want to keep it limited so they can mark up the value of it. And that's why if you go and fill up your tanks right now, especially in Canada, and I know the United States feels the same way, it is an abundant cost. And a lot of people now have to sacrifice summer vacations, heating your homes, all this stuff that, typical middle-class families have done for years. And she's saying this in 2014. Here's more of this.
From, the mighty Russian gas producer is now saying, Jesus Christ, the Americans have a lot of gas now. So I would like you, Russ, to comment on this and talk about what impact that's going to have on the politics. Because, if we find that our fossil fuels are a lot cheaper, and this economic pressure that we had really been worrying about, certainly up to 2008, that pressure is gone. Aren't we going to forget about these issues for a while?
I'm personally a guy.
So she just asked this guy here, well, aren't you worried about the politics of this? Because if there's a lot of energy sources, if a lot of other countries are producing and exporting their own energy, how is that going to fundamentally affect the politics of this? Now, let's not forget that Chrystia Freeland is a member of the World Economic Forum. She's a globalist. So she's not worried about the politics of Canada per se. She's worried about the overall global politics of this. How are we going to scam people if we could produce our own energy and make it cheaper for people and readily available for people? Here's the response to this.
I don't like sound bites as a rule, but I do believe in the all of the above strategy, because I don't think renewables can get to a major portion of the supply of world demand by 2050 and completely displace fossil fuels.
Okay, so Alexis is wrong. We're not going to be off fossil fuels in 2050.
I think it's going to be a challenge. I think you're going to have. I think it would have to have a growth that is unprecedented in any other energy development that we have ever seen. You take wood, coal, petroleum products of any kind. The growth rate that you have to have would be unprecedented. I think you have to continue to try. But
so there's someone making the statement that, you know, you can attempt to get renewable resources and renewable energy supply to many different people, but it's not going to meet the demands by 2050. And I think that's what people are realizing of this. That's what people are realizing now at this moment, that this idea of net zero, this idea of reducing, it's never going to happen. It's already too late. It's not going to happen. So there needs to be some sort of scientific discussion on how we as a society could manage this. To manage the fact that there is no possible way we are going to have renewable sources take over the fossil fuel industry and meet the same demands. There's no possible way. There's no feasible way to this. It's absolutely impossible. So we got to find a way to incorporate all this and find different measures and look at initiatives that actually benefit society and nature as a whole, rather than just dictating politics and putting out taxes on people and forcing people to consume electric vehicles, which is also going to raise the demand for energy. And it's going to be more of a challenge to meet those demands if everyone goes to electric vehicle.
I think we also have to be very realistic and recognize that coal and natural gas, no matter where that natural gas is produced, from Russia to supply Europe or within our own borders, which has been a real economic change for this country, it's going to have to be produced to meet the energy demand of the population in 2050. We need efficiency, we need more supply, and if we continue on the rates that we've got in both, we have an unsustainable gap that we will not be able to fill. So we're going to need the efficiency end, and we're going to need more resources, and it can't just be alternative.
My name is Jamie Cox, and full disclosure, I work for Shell, and I am an evil big oil lobbyist. So I guess my question here is, how can we, having been on the government side, you know, are there things that we're not doing that we should be doing?
Okay, excellent. Let's start with that one. Richard, how can Shell lobbyists educate government officials better?
I think that there are places that are maybe emerging where there's, you know, politically feasible areas where progress could be made. Unclear if that'll happen at this point. So a big thing on everybody's mind is the fiscal situation, balancing the budget.
In this economic climate, how committed to a balanced budget would you be right now? Would it worry you to go into deficit in this current climate to, as you say, put more people to work?
The commitment needs to be a commitment to grow the economy, and the budget will balance itself.
Right.
That was the claim to fame. The budget was going to balance itself. We just have this plan that somehow, somewhere, it's all going to work out. It's kind of the same motto that came with the carbon tax. You know, if you give us the money, somewhere out there, that money is going to be useful to solving the weather problems. Even though there is no feasible answer, there's no plausible scientific analysis that points any of this in a good direction. That taxing people at 23%, and again, I want to put on record, at 2%, France completely revolted against its government, and here we are at 23%. What the hell are we doing? 23% is not going to do anything. And I would have a little bit of a more sympathetic approach if there was a response that took that money and, say, invested into better efficiency when it comes to the energy sector. At least I would have something a little bit more insightful to say, instead of just calling this a scam, which it is. It's a scam because that money that's supposed to help stop pollution and invest into, it's not doing anything. It's just collecting money and collecting for the benefit of the government, for the benefit of monitoring the situation, but not actually implementing any sort of change. And just remind people that the two biggest proponents of polluters, according to statistics, is the government itself and the military. Two areas that they know they're not going to put their hands on. But they're going to tax you, the ordinary, simple, middle-class Canadian, because you had to take your car to work, to go work 8 hours, to come back home and pay extortionate amount of taxes and bills. Because apparently, you're the awful one. You're the one that needs to change.
So whereas the notion of a carbon tax was, the T word, tax, is just like, the third rail of US politics. But that's emerging, but not because of carbon per se, but because the government needs to balance the budget.
So there you go. The carbon tax has nothing to do with carbon tax. It had nothing to do with the environment. That's why it's at 23%. Not because of anything to do with the planet, but because, holy shit, we got to balance the budget. And the only way to do so and make us look like green thumb efficients is to say it's for carbon, to say it's for climate change, even though they don't give two rats' asses about it. Ladies and gentlemen, the scam is finally exposed. Now you know the rest of the story. Now you know exactly why they push aggressively on this. Not because of anything to do with the planet or the environment or anything to do with our lives and future, or the children's future, as they say. It is all a scam to raise enough money to balance their own mess. And if they truly do care about balancing that budget, do you think all that money was sent to Ukraine and Israel and Haiti and all these other nations to preemptive war was such a great idea for this country? Should we maybe take all that money, all that resources, all that extraction of our finances and our Federal Reserve and invest that into Canada's economy? Provide good jobs, maybe invest in our infrastructure when it comes to energy so we can have a more efficient nation. That would be a start. That would actually grow the economy better, but we're not doing that. And because we're not doing that, they have to find money. And in order for them to find money, they have to trick you into coughing up more dollars. And that's where all this comes from. And again, not saying that, we should be leading down this path, but let you know, in France, 2%, they completely burnt down their city. Not implementing that we should, but we're not getting any reaction at 23%. Kind of shocking. And here's even this. This is from the Counter Signal. Chrystia Freeland was asked about high grocery prices, and she says that the Liberal government won't rule out the use of tax policy to stabilize grocery prices. How exactly will the new tax policies do that? So, again, the Liberal motif of give us money, we won't have a plan, but it'll work out at some point. Give us more money, and at some point, that money is going to do something for itself. And here she is in action, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, right from the WEF, the granddaughter of a Nazi collaborator. Here she is explaining to people that The grocery price will work itself. Listen to this.
As a follow-up, are new taxes something that your government is considering, or what can be done immediately? I mean, we have record number of people going to use the food bank. Exactly when can Canadians expect some relief?
As I said, it's a very important question. It's a very important issue. It is something we are absolutely focused on, and we are prepared to use every tool in our toolbox, including tax policy, to make sure that prices stabilize.
And that's what you call stalling for time. That's what she's doing there. Like, that's a very important question. It's a very, very important question. I'm glad you asked that question. And we are going to use everything in our toolbox to combat that issue, that question you brought up. Next. She didn't answer anything. She didn't respond to anything. She just literally stalled for time. This is like when your child stole a cookie from the cookie jar and makes up a bogus story about just to stall for time. Like, oh, well, you know, the cookie in the cookie jar? Did we have a cookie jar? I didn't know anything about this cookie jar. So there you go. The carbon scam. The carbon scam at 23%. The downward spiral of completely ruining this country. Fundamentally being a cost burden for so many Canadians to afford basic necessities. And I just want to reiterate one last time that 2% in France, they revolted. And here we are at 23%. And I'm still trying to inform people about this. I don't know what else it's going to take. Because clearly, they're not going to combat issues. They're not going to solve anything. They're the ones that are actually purposely doing this to scam you and put a carrot in front of your nose, pretending to be environmentalists when nothing of the environment is even mentioned in any proposal of this carbon scam taxing of Canadians.